Sounds good. All right, folks.
Okay.
Good afternoon. We've just opened up the meeting space, knowing that some of you will join us a little bit later, but welcome in to this afternoon's session with the DPPH, or the Decolonial Perspectives and Practices Hub. We enjoy working with you so much, and we're so pleased to be part of your 4th Syllabus Decon session happening live today, both via ForSpace and Zoom. So what is Fourth Space? Well, as you can see, we are located right, well, maybe you can't see, maybe you don't recognize what's behind me, but we are in downtown Tiohtià:ke in Montreal on an unceded Indigenous land here at the SGW Concordia campus. Fourth Space is a physical space where we facilitate daily activities that allow us to come together, whether virtually or in person, for exchange and knowledge sharing. We do focus on what our Concordia community members are doing, what folks are working on, and that includes obviously research, various initiatives and course activities, and what various student groups are developing in terms of activities as well. So we really enjoy the opportunity to work with DPPH in this manner. So as you've already noticed, we are running this space here today as an event, as a Zoom meeting, rather than a webinar, for all of the obvious reasons, in that we want you to be able to workshop and come together in breakout rooms, be able to turn on your cameras and your audios and discuss freely by engaging with one another directly. So I'll also just briefly mention that we are live streaming and recording this event, and that is available on YouTube, and I'll pop the link to that right now if you'd like to share it with your friends and families. And it also means that the recording will be available there right after the event is done. Okay, that's it for me in terms of housekeeping. So on that note, I'll pass it over to you, Jamila. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Anna. We're very appreciative of this longstanding relationship and collaboration with ForSpace. We'd also like to thank our sponsors at the Shift Center for Social Transformation, our partners at the Ethnoculture Art History Department, the research team, the Feminist Media Studio, and other collaborators across the university and outside the university. Before we continue today, we just ask you if you could stay till 2 p.m. We have a lot of things planned for you. I'm going to pass it over to Cheslin to give you rules of engagement.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamila. Thank you, everyone, for space and everybody watching right now. So I'm Ches. I'm going to be your tech support person and chat facilitator. So any question at any given point in time, just private message me straight into the chat and I'll be right with you. So I'm going to walk you through the basics. So if you look here, you see the bar, which is your panel options. And we're going to take it from left to right. So on your left, you see the mute. You will be prompted at different points of time to, speak out loud. And whenever you want to be more vocally active, then you know that you're going to have designated pockets of time to do so. Of course, we also kindly invite you to turn on your video feed when and if possible, so that we may engage with you on a more human level and see beautiful faces. Then next to that, you have the participants option. So same as I did, you can click on your name there on the list and share your pronouns with me and with us. And next to that, you have the chat. You can, private message, public message, anybody there. And again, any questions tech support wise, let me know. Later, when we're going to move into the syllabus decon, you'll be prompted to join your breakout room. When you do so, your panel would change a little bit and you'll have the hand raise option. So again, if you want extra support, also know that we'll be coming in and out of the rooms just to make sure that we're driving the conversation forward and that all your questions are answered. And at that point in time, I will repeat that you will see the number that you will be assigned. You want to keep this in mind for when you're going to be actually, doing the syllabus decon. And last but not least, up top on your right, you're going to see this little hamburger option. So it's called view for the most part. And you can decide to toggle on and off between the gallery view, which is seeing everyone, or the speaker, so only seeing the person who's being highlighted. So this is the overview. As I said, any question, you know where to find me. And you're also more than welcome to introduce yourself in the chat or online. So that's it for me for now. Passing it on to Jamila as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. So we're going to just open you up with the agenda of what will happen today. So my name is Jamila. I'm a PhD of sociology student here at Concordia. I'm also your facilitator and fellow participant today. And I wanted to just shout out Alban, who's also a part of the Decolonial Hub, who's a participant today. And you can definitely introduce yourself if you like, Alban.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, sorry. I was just checking if this is working still. Yeah, it's nice to be here and I'm happy to enjoy another syllabus decon. It's going to be cool to have new perspectives with Dr. Kasim, for example, and then everyone else who's here today.
Thanks, Alban. Happy to have you.
So I'm quickly going to jump in. I'm Shes, and I'm doing my MA Creation research on Afro-Indigenous digital oral storytelling and looking at how this allows us to be in the resistance together through translation projects. And I'm your chat support person and chat facilitator as well. And then we have the beautiful Esgi with us as well, so you can come in and introduce.
Hello, everyone, physically from the fourth space and with my lovely mic. I'm Ezgi. I'm a PhD candidate in education. You may know me from the public scholar work, or I was also a former guest speaker for the previous Syllabus Decon event that you may remember. Now I'm Hub's member, so I'm so happy. I'm glad to be member of a hub and your co-facilitator today, as well as your co-participant.
Thank you very much, SD, and we're happy to have you as well. So we're going to jump into a lead acknowledgement. We'll open up the floor for who we are, get into some about what is a syllabus deconstruction, what is its context. Then we're going to have Kasim, Dr. Kasim, share his work, get into our activity where we deconstruct the syllabus in real time, and then send you away with some interesting takeaways and micro actions. So I'm going to send it to Ches for our lead acknowledgements.
Amazing, thank you, Jamila. And so in a fashion that is extremely unique to the Hub, we have this capacity to acknowledge two specific separate legacies and two distinct categories of autonomous peoples, namely the Black and the Indigenous, through our land-specific acknowledgements that center Concordia as our locus of engagement together. And in so doing, we want to grant each category of peoples its own space to be seen, heard, recognized, empowered in the language of their own self-determination and truth. We do so in ways that are not comparative, in ways that are not relative to one another, because we're using their very own words and their legacies to ground us all into revolutionary allyship and educational advocacy. In this capacity, we activate what transracial allyship is, and we model this as a hub by looking at BIPOC autonomy, leadership, self-governance, and willful responsible allyship. And we also want to specifically acknowledge the people in color in the BIPOC, histories, because they've been extremely instrumental now, as have always been so in the past, and empowering us to construct this core layer of transracial allyship for the Black and the Indigenous communities particularly. We acknowledge their voices as historically removed, erased, and as the silent bodies, voices, and identities and peoples have been historically instrumental in destabilizing coloniality and racism. So I'm going to proceed with reading to you the land's acknowledgements, and we're going to take 10 seconds of silence after each. And this is how we choose to mobilize ourselves through silence to manifest activism and solidarity work. And the first land acknowledgements is one that is brought to us by the Indigenous Directions Leadership Group, and you can find it on the Concordia website. So I have it in front of me, but you're welcome to close your eyes, listen, and then we're going to take the 10 seconds. So let's go together. I would like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Ganeganega Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. The Jog in Montreal is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples who respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future, and our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. So now we're going to take 10 seconds of silence before we proceed onwards. Beautiful. So thank you. Now we will hold space for a different legacy. And this one is the Blackland Acknowledgement. It is brought to us here at the Hub through the Black Canadian Tribute. So here it goes. As Black Canadians, land acknowledgements are a moment to honor the implications of being displaced, and enslaved peoples on stolen lands, to acknowledge our solidarity with the Indigenous peoples of Canada as we frequent and benefit from their lands within our shared histories of genocide, dispossession, and ongoing systemic oppression by settler colonialism. Taking from Natasha Henry, President of Ontario Black History Association, and Chamake Mongo from the Canadian Race Relations Association, as Black people in Canada, let's pay homage to the exploited Africans, the Black and enslaved, who risked their lives for us to be here together and live out there without physical chains. So we're going to take 10 seconds for acknowledgement. Beautiful. So thank you, everyone. And now I'm passing it on to Jamila for the continuation.
Thank you very much, Chess, for that powerful acknowledgements. So for people who don't know us, we're the Decolonial Perspectives and Practices Hub. We're an independent coalition of racialized, queer, and allied persons to facilitate spaces for decolonial perspectives and practices to thrive, develop, and be incorporated into our diverse teaching and learning environments. To cultivate a university and community space that empowers and centralizes BIPOC peoples, we bring faculty, staff, students, and community activists together to engage in how to do decolonial co-creation, as we'll show you today. So our approach is to guide you and the rest of our Hub community to disrupt oppressive traditions in the academy in a manner that's action-oriented, anti-colonial, and horizontal. So instead of static definitions and answers, we guide you to the practice of collaborating with peers beyond power dynamics and intersections. So our contribution to the decolonial movement is to model how co-creation can be achieved in real time to illuminate systemic gaps and mobilize individuals for accountability and commitments to action. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Ezgi and give you some context of our syllabus deconstructions.
Thank you, Jamila. And welcome to our Syllabus Decon. It's our 4th Syllabus Decon event. And what is Syllabus deconstruction if you are already been in this place or it's your first time? So what we have been trying with these Syllabus Decon events that we will share with you now. We aim to have open, safe, and brave space that active participation can flourish. Hub adopts a co-creative approach to reimagine the syllabus from decolonial frameworks and perspectives. More than a diverse reading list, we will collectively share our best practices and then deconstruct syllabus in a real time. We use a model to power, which we aim to co-create polarizing our knowledge and learning environments. We assume that this collective and co-creative work can bring up a lot of complexities around decolonization, and also we some concrete ways actively dismantle colonial practices within the classrooms. This challenge requires creating a collective critical reflection on how we challenge colonial knowledge production. Now I will pass it on Jamila again to share, because it's our 4th Syllabus Decon event, what we have been learning from these events.
Thank you, SD. So there has been a lot learned in the past 3 years doing these syllabus deconstructions. And what came up for us were 3 specific principles: that the syllabus involves challenging the canon, the syllabus is a tool for knowledge, and deconstructing the syllabus is more than a plug and play of answers. It's an evolving process that's also beyond the reading list. It's beyond just kind of putting new scholars into the syllabus, even though that's important, and we'll explain later why and how to complexify that. So over the past 3 years, our first insight was who is being silenced in a syllabus, who is being oppressed, how and why. In our second syllabus deconstruction, we played with the voices that are missing and what the radical potential is for a syllabus to move away from the canon. So we talked about the idea of student sovereignty, a syllabus that's created by and for student leadership, transformative justice, a syllabus that is thinking of maybe having all BIPOC scholarship. What does that look like? And also ethical citations. So really questioning, and this is for the reading list, who is the knowledge and worldview centralized for, and who is missing in that scholarship as well. In our third syllabus deconstruction that happened over the summer, we performed our first collective physical deconstruction of a syllabus in real time and realized that the syllabus has many different components. It has the reading list, it has the introductions where land acknowledgements can be mobilized, it has the course objectives. And today, in our fourth deconstruction, we hope to further our insights and deepen our analysis of the different ways to deconstruct the syllabus using community and peer-to-peer knowledge as the foundation of our interrogation. So really building off of what we've already learned and to flourish something new. So as we mentioned, more than a diverse reading list, we want you to conceive of the syllabus as a tool that determines the capacity for a course to train students and educators to either maintain systemic racism and oppression or become agents of change. So because of this, we see no better time than to view the syllabus as a site for intervention, a tool with the potential for decolonial resistance. So I would love now to truly introduce our speaker. I'm going to pass it over to Ezgi.
Today, we are honored to have Dr. Kasim Ali Tirmizey as a guest speaker with us. Kasim Tirmizey is a teacher and writer. He is currently an instructor in humanities and geography at Marinopolis College. He has a PhD in environmental studies from York University. He will briefly share his own experience on how to deconstruct and decolonize the syllabus and how he applies it into classroom. After his presentation, which takes around 10 to 15 minutes, we will open the floor to your questions. Please feel free to share your questions during the presentation through our Zoom chat or on Facebook Live. And now, without further ado, here is our special guest speaker, Dr. Kasim.
Thank you, Ezgi, and all the organizers for the invitation and for organizing this. I mean, it obviously shows that there's a lot of effort and labor that's involved, especially, I guess, in the Zoom world that we're in today. So thank you for this. I'm going to share my screen. Try to see if this works. Okay, so I think you see my. Okay, so I mean, I got some questions prior to this presentation, prior to today, and so I'm just going to frame the direction that I'm going to be taking in terms of those questions. So one of the things I was asked, like, how did I come to do the work that I do of trying to, I guess, rethink the way I teach, or especially in thinking about decolonization. I mean, if I take the question in terms of, let's say, a moment in my own life where things, an important learning moment in thinking about education was about 2 decades ago, about where I was, and I just finished my undergrad. I had finished an engineering degree, and I was interested in international development, save the world, I guess, a lot of colonial ideas that are embedded inside that. And I went to Ecuador. And I was trying to develop a community computer center. And, there was a talk one day, and people from the Sarayaku nation, which is in the Amazon. I was not there, but let's say and some of them had come to the city in Quito. And they were speaking about the impact of oil corporations, petroleum corporations and extraction on their territory. And for me, that was especially as an engineer, like a real turning point in thinking about the importance of centering. Here was a moment, in this university space where there was a talk, and the center of the position and perspective was Indigenous peoples, which was something, for someone who was then, let's say 23, was something very new to me. And it really shifted the way I thought about engineering or technology, or my own future directions of trying to become an educator. And if I take some of those ideas then and to think fast forward 2 decades, when I think about, let's say, this phrase about decolonizing education or decolonial, decolonizing the syllabus, those are phrases where, again, I'm sympathetic to, but I hesitate to use such phrases, let's say decolonizing education, only because I find it difficult that I can't. Maybe one way of imagining it is that it seems like, decolonizing the classroom is to make the classroom this autonomous space where we've ended colonialism. And the way I like to orient my teaching is an attempt to, how do I make my teaching in ways that can support Indigenous self-determination, which can support struggles against anti-Black racism? So it's, and obviously I say that as an attempt because I know that I'm still learning and I'm trying to figure this out. And so I'm in no way I'm trying to belittle, let's say, those initiatives which are for decolonizing education. Just maybe the way I like to orient it is, thinking of centering those struggles in their place and seeing how my education could support that. I always think, I do land acknowledgements in my course, but I also think about how can I do a land acknowledgement without having that being connected to a process of land back. And so the question of struggles is always something which I try to think about and think of ways in which think about where the boundaries between the classroom and the world. So, for me, I can't think about decolonization in the classroom without thinking about decolonization more broadly, thinking about ongoing forms of colonization in Kanasatake, in Ganawage. A year and a half ago, Wet'suwet'en became on the national stage as well. How do we think about, Black Lives Matter? How do we think about those struggles and bring those into the classroom? And so, in some ways, for me, let's say I've been teaching courses on the politics of food. Also, when I was in Concordia, teaching a course on impact of technology in society. And in those kinds of courses, I try to bring the question of Indigenous struggles or other forms of anti-colonial struggles into the classroom, bring those ideas in that spaces. In some ways, also thinking beyond the classroom. Some of my work is also, I've recently been co-organizing a campaign with students at McGill and outside McGill, thinking about divestment. McGill University has part of their endowments in TC Energy, and about $5 million about. And this, TC Energy is the owner of the CGL pipeline, which is constructed, which goes through unceded Wet'suwet'en territory. So for me, it's also to think about the ways beyond the classroom or how the university institution itself is implicated in colonial processes, and thinking about decolonization as partly of doing that work, which in transforming the institution and how it's implicated in colonialism. One thing which also oftentimes, let's say in the past when I had class, I assumed, let's say going into the classroom, that I had settler students or had non-Indigenous students. And then I get confronted with that when I find that I have also, Indigenous students sometimes. And it really gets me to think, how do I design a course with that in mind? So if I'm integrating Indigenous knowledge, but I also have Indigenous students, where sometimes students don't want to participate. And because they don't feel it's, even if we work in small groups, where there's real barriers for students to share their experiences in the classroom. And so it's, again, this kind of way in which the classroom and the outside world are not these separate, the door might be there, but the boundary is tenuous, right? So the power relations which exist in society also come out and play in the classroom. So it's difficult. I mean, there's real barriers for me to create a safe space or create a space where, Indigenous students can feel empowered to share their experiences and points of view, where without making that space, try to, let's say where I'm at right now at Marianopolis College, there isn't a First Nations house. I think Dawson might have that. There's very few Indigenous faculty. So, it's also about doing that work of trying to get our college to adopt the Truth and Reconciliation Plan of Action. It's about trying to create those spaces where students can meet other students, other Indigenous students, which becomes, that whatever I can do with my syllabus is always, there's some sort of institutional barrier to that, some structural barrier or societal barrier, which creates limitations on what I can do. So it's also about, as a teacher, of creating, some of those spaces and trying to work through that. Another thing which, thinking about decolonizing education is, I think there's a large barrier to saying Palestine. If we're also thinking about decolonization, it's also how do we create spaces where we can say Palestine without teachers being repressed? This comes back to our syllabi, right? And what do we include? Do we choose not to include Palestine in our syllabus when we're talking about themes which aren't relevant, when we feel that we have to censor ourselves because we feel we might be penalized for that? So I also want to move to, thinking, another question that came was, thinking about practices, like how do I try to shape my teaching to think about, decolonizing education. And, one course that I'm teaching right now is called Food, Land, and Culture. And, we have these courses on worldviews. And so I use my approach on thinking about worldviews is through food. And I see this as a really productive way of, thinking about the diversity of worldviews that are in the classroom, which students might be not conscious of. But also to introduce, thinking, especially since we're in Jojage, to center, Haudenosaunee perspectives about food. So I spend, 2 weeks thinking about Haudenosaunee perspectives. And here I also tell students that I'm not an expert on Haudenosaunee perspectives on food. This also comes across when, I have students who are Haudenosaunee in the classroom. But I try to draw on resources, of people who, Indigenous or Haudenosaunee scholars, community activists who have developed, educational resources. In thinking about food, one resource has been developed by, say, a former teacher of mine and who's been collaborating with Haudenosaunee community organizers and activists, is this Legacies Earth to Tables. And so this is a really good resource. I find that it's been co-produced with, Haudenosaunee food activists in thinking about food and colonization and also decolonization. And it's really also geared towards thinking how can, here are articles, very accessible articles that, students can read, but also activities that we can think about. And so one of the themes that comes there is, thinking about how food and residential schools, how residential schools, so one is, one could probably talk about residential schools and sociology, but, in a course like on food, we can also connect it there. Where, the question of people's diets was shaped by residential schools. And, people talk about how unhealthy diets in Indigenous communities is a legacy of the diets and foods that were at residential schools. So I think, one can bring in multiple ways and how, trying to integrate in various courses, Indigenous perspectives and experiences and thinking about colonization. And, I also try to, it's very important for me to work to have people from, let's say, Ganawagi come into my classroom, those who are working on, let's say, food issues. When I was at Concordia, Donna Goodleaf was a really important resource person, thinking about protocols, and I'd say, how do I invite someone into my classroom? And someone who she introduced me was Tio Hemlock, who is this food activist who's organizing a community garden in Ganawagi, and he's someone who's been coming to my classroom to talking about experiences about land struggles and food struggles in Ganawagi. And so I think that's bringing those resources, or I don't like to call it resources, but say bringing providing a platform for Indigenous elders and scholars and activists coming into the classroom. I find it is very useful, and it's enlightening for students as well when they haven't had teachers who are Indigenous. One thing that I in bringing to, let's say, I also teach a class on social movements, and here for me it's really important to talk about struggles, Indigenous struggles, and thinking about struggles also close to home. An important moment, formative and almost in my own politicization was the so-called Oka crisis, or the Kanasataki resistance in 1990 against the municipality of Oka of extending their golf course onto those lands. And so I bring up, the question of Wet'suwet'en in my classrooms, as if I'm talking about technology, I talk about petroleum technology and colonization. And I bring up Wet'suwet'en. And I also, try to emphasize, I guess, this kind of aspect of, let's say, of colonization, but also decolonization, that there are these initiatives of resistance, of different types of technologies or other ways of, I think it's really good to talk about residential schools and colonization, but it's also really important to talk about, resistance as well, or these alternatives that Indigenous people are developing. Or so thinking also about these two aspects. In whatever kind of course I try to do, I always try to bring up the theme of colonization and decolonization, whether it's with food or if it's with technology, or if it's thinking about geography. How am I doing for time?
You're perfect. You have about 3-4 minutes left. Okay.
I think probably since we're thinking about syllabi, I'll talk a little bit about assignments. One thing I try to do, besides having exams, if we're thinking about stage-up students or undergrad students, I try to make sure that there's an assignment which is self-reflexive. And one thing which I find really useful, which I learned from a type of assignment that I got from a former teacher of mine, Deborah Barn, is having intergenerational food essay, where they have to interview the students. I'm also thinking about, the diversity of my students is something, the themes that we talk about in the class should be things that students could analyze in their own lives. And I find it really useful thinking about how food has transformed in society, in having them interview a parent or someone of that generation, or someone of their grandparents' generation, and to do this, look at this transformation of food through these three generations, their grandparents, parents, and themselves. And from there, various themes come up. Themes of migration, themes about increasing role of globalization. Some who are thinking a little deeper try to see how how their food system is implicated in colonialism, but also center themselves, like how they themselves are implicated. These are not just themes that are outside of ourselves, but they're very much connected to our world. Our world, the food that we have, let's say in Jojagi today, is very much connected to land occupation, globalization, unequal trade practices that are practiced across the world, which connected to, in some parts, enslavement in terms of dispossession, and oftentimes like how Canada is implicated in that. And so I try to get students to think about this kind of self-reflexive kind of exercise, thinking about their own family histories and how their own privileges or their own limitations that they might come across are, connected to these ideas. And I think they really, by analyzing their own family history, I think they're quite invested in their family history. And sometimes, I think it's quite enlightening for students. I mean, in a different context, I remember one student I had, I was teaching one semester in Pakistan, and I did this exercise with students there. And, one enlightening kind of like this kind of reflection that this one student had was they themselves, their family had land, had, large agricultural land, and they, in their family, their grandparent was highly praised because, he was someone who worked in the military, and he, through that activity, they got access to land, and, he was quite revered. And then there's this moment where this granddaughter was reflecting on that history and thought, what, the reason he got land was because he was working with the British during British colonialism. And that's how the family got land. And so there was this kind of moment of self-reflection of the privileges that, as a landowning family, the student was able to come to that, moment of reflection through their implication in these power relations. I can't think of some of those reflections right now for my students here in Jojage, but I think those kinds of exercises are quite important, more than, let's say, lecturing about something which appears, to be distant from them, but trying to get them to see how they themselves are implicated, and even maybe how they might find limitations in the world because of things like race, class, or gender. And I just wanted to end with thinking about something I often think about is, if we are in, how do we think about decolonization in a neoliberal university? I mean, myself, I'm not a permanent teacher anywhere. I mean, I've taught while living in Montreal, I've taught at Concordia, Montreal, in McGill, at University of Ottawa. There was a semester I would make trips every Thursday, travel 2 hours to Ottawa and teach there for 3 hours and come back. I mean, and those were the things that, I mean, right now I'm at Marianopolis, and it's not a permanent job. And so I have a situation where I get maybe have to teach a course, and it's like in 1 week, I've been assigned, like 1 week before classes start, I'm assigned this course. And it's a new course maybe. Or I have, like right now in Marianopolis, I have 4 courses. It's the first time I'm teaching, it's my second semester at Marianopolis, and I'm given 4 courses. And in the syllabi that I'm given, it's hard to work with because there isn't, let's say, I'm given a course on urban geography, and people haven't thought about how do we think about Black geographies? How do we think about Indigenous geographies when we think about Montreal? And so there's a lot of work that's needs to be done. I mean, if we want to integrate, and for me, it's really important, but as a precarious teacher who's not sure I'm going to teach this course again, it's very, it's a lot of work. There's requires late nights, doing research oneself, redesigning syllabi where there isn't syllabi, trying to, and there's not enough resources in universities or colleges for thinking about how a lot of our teaching is done by part-time faculty. And if we want to be serious about decolonization, how do we provide those resources and full-time work or more less precarious work where we can do that work? Otherwise, inheriting previous syllabi becomes a real limitation of trying to integrate Black knowledge, Indigenous knowledge, or rethinking syllabi, rethinking assignments. So, I mean, those are some, I guess, scattered notes on things that I'm thinking about. I'm still in the process of. I'm still learning, but I mean, hopefully it was productive.
Thank you, Dr. Kasim, for this wonderful presentation. We are very grateful to have you sharing experiences and practices. And actually, you raised many important points we would like to also address in our questions and integration and engagement with you right now with the questions. Before we leave the floor for the questions, I would like to also make the one comment that how and what extent that how we use the term decolonizing education is very important. And in our in our previous Syllabus Decon event, in my talk, I mentioned about how we could use decolonizing education, decolonizing as a verb rather than noun, because decolonizing is ongoing process that we all try to engage in. And the other term comes to my mind is that decolonization is not a metaphor, that while we try to decolonizing education, we don't further follow the patterns of colonial engagement in education. And you raised, Dr. Kasim, many other important points, how you engage in your syllabus in different fields, in the food systems, and you also mentioned about the assignment and self-reflection and how important it is to have a different variety of assignments in our course syllabuses. And the last point that you raised, the question about decolonization in neoliberal university. I do believe there are two types of scholars who believe we can decolonize universities, academia, and there are some scholars who believe actually decolonization cannot happen in the university. And I assume your positionality is more, although it's very challenging and limiting currently, that still we can decolonize academia. Could you elaborate on that point further, whether you believe in which point of view, and then we can have more questions on the chat that we can engage more.
I think decolonization or anti-colonialism or decolonizing is I guess the trenches are multiple, right? Maybe taking a metaphor from Gramsci, that the points of struggle are at multiple places, and it's, I guess, transformation has to be, it's a societal transformation, and I think it has to be multiple work, right? Like in the classroom, in relationship to the administration, in our faculty councils, in the resources that we, thinking about reparations, thinking about land back. It's also, happening outside the classroom, how outside the university campus. And so I think the transformation has to be occurring multiple places. I mean, for me, I center what's happening outside. I mean, a lot of the transformations and calls for, if people are thinking today about decolonizing the university, it was only because there is this indigenous resurgence that's been happening, in the past decades, which has forced a lot of people to rethink what's happening in university. So I think in some ways, the university is lagging behind. But the forefront of these struggles is on the streets, or it's in the fields, or it's in the forests. And if we're thinking about Wet'suwet'en. But I think we can see how we can try to complement that in the classroom. I think these are people who are students are going to be going outside the classroom, going to go outside universities afterwards. But so I think it's multiple. But I don't want to raise the platform of the classroom to too high of a of its location, that to place importance in what happens in the streets.
Thank you so much. I totally agree on the point that decolonizing should happen in variety spaces, not only in the classrooms, not outside beyond the classroom, but it should be in different levels and different places that it should take place. And it's also another point that you mentioned, that society plays an important role in the classroom that we cannot really ignore, that power structured in the society also plays role in the classrooms. Now I'm opening stage for further questions. Is there anyone who would like to take on?
Yeah, I can jump in. First, I wanted to say thank you so much, Kasim, for your talk. It's inspired me in many different ways, and I'm sure a lot of the audience. I wanted to really kind of ask a follow-up question to the statement that you made, which I absolutely love, which you were discussing your experience kind of bringing in Indigenous knowledges into your classroom, and then some Indigenous students maybe not wanting to participate, or it could have been hypothetical. And it made me think about Audra Simpson's book, Mohawk Interruptus, where she really talks about the politics of refusal. And it's really an amazing book and everyone should read it, but she talks about a lot of Indigenous people in Canada refused to assimilate and kind of created a nation within a nation, and it's amazing. And so it makes me think of the efforts that a lot of people are making for BIPOC students in the class. And there's this, this idea that once we make these efforts, the BIPOC students are going to be fine, they're going to be great, they're going to all participate. So in those instances where BIPOC students, and I say BIPOC as a general, refuse, and they say, this is not my interest, because many people don't know, but there's a lot of BIPOC students who, are not a part of these type of politics. They're just living their lives and they prefer to just kind of turn it all off. And so what advice could you potentially give to some educators who might have those experiences where the BIPOC students in their class refuse to kind of go along with their version of decolonization? How do you kind of get through those tense moments? And maybe there's no answer, but throwing it out there.
I know, it's sometimes it maybe is more contextual. I know, like in a kind of different situation where I had, we're talking about, I was teaching a course at Concordia. It was called Impact of Technology on Society. And we were talking about colonialism and globalization, and I guess at a global level as well. And, I had an Egyptian student who was saying, the Suez Canal, brought a lot of progress to Egypt. And, as someone who's from South Asia, I also hear this, even on the streets of Pakistan, I hear this, that, oh yeah, that the British brought trains, we should, there's something good about colonialism. So there is, those are, those voices come up, and those, maybe in families, and it's, generations. So those points of view come up, and I guess the one way I find that is useful is to have a dialogue, to ask questions, like for what purpose were those trains built, or what purpose was that Suez Canal built? Obviously not everyone's convinced afterwards, but I guess it's a process, right? And I think one thing which I've had also in the past, I've had moments where students push back also, not necessarily BIPOC students, but say in the classroom, people, I'm talking about colonization, and I get people having statements which are affirming colonization, affirming genocide, and I sometimes think okay, why aren't other students responding to this? And in certain classes, there's a dynamic that certain student voices become the dominant. I know maybe sometimes we have this situation where there's those same 5 students are speaking, but I've had cases where it's also, in some cases it becomes, other students who have critical voices don't feel like they want to speak. I had a carousel activity once. So I'm not giving any solutions here, I'm giving more complications. I think we're gonna also do a carousel activity here. And I thought when I had an Indigenous student tell me afterwards that they don't feel like the dynamic in the classroom, although I might be affirming, but they didn't feel like they could respond to things because there were people who were were always pushing back. I thought, okay, maybe let's not have let's say group activity and have a plenary, or not people like me asking questions. Okay, I thought, maybe I'll do this carousel where we're going to put chart paper around the room, although it's a 60 student classroom. We've had this chart and we have these questions and they have to go around and answering. And so, I thought there will be students who might respond there. But I also found this, it also created a platform for people to push back. So it was, so there's no easy answers. I think sometimes, students are legitimate and I don't want to speak. I don't want to share with students who have very different experiences. Like if we're talking about residential schools and food, for me to talk about that to settlers is one thing, but it's also traumatic for Indigenous students. So then, like, I was talking to one student from Haudenosaunee who was talking that, okay, on Orange Shirt Day or Day of Truth and Reconciliation, she wanted to stay home. And so I think we also have to respect those silences. I mean, there's spaces that, you know, students have. And so it becomes like, it's very difficult. Like, how do we talk about these things, which can be, I mean, it's not like, the experiences are like, when I think about Indigenous students, you know, the spaces that it creates is, it can also be, especially speaking about these with settler students who don't know, who are not sensitive, or just like, it's like, oh yeah, he's talking about this again. But like, what does it mean, like, for like Indigenous students to experience that? I have no solution to that when it's like you have your 29, 30 students and there's one Indigenous student. I have no solution other than that we need institutional support, like, you know, a First Nations house for like Indigenous students. I can't solve it all in the classroom. I mean, I'm sure there's something I can improve on, but I know that the solution is beyond my classroom.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kasim. I'm going to pass over to Ches, but I just wanted to say, I love how you didn't have a solution. And I think that's an amazing solution for educators listening, is that you're not going to have the answers. But anyways, that was just fantastic. Ches, I'll pass it to you.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Kasim. It's very powerful, and similar to what, you know, we shared prior. Decolonization is, you cannot preemptively design what it's going to look like in a classroom, because it demands this co-creationality between students, prof, and everybody. It's like a co-creation. And as you said, I feel change does not always look like change. So being in a classroom and you have dissent is a form of revolution that is anti-colonialist, because, you know, my dad always quotes this saying that even the most desired of changes is not without its friction. So people that are engaged in the work will also be disrupted. People that are not part of the work are also going to be disrupted. And oftentimes, because it doesn't feel and behave like comfort, we're quick to dismiss it as something that is desirable. But to be in a classroom where, you know, you are holding space for that divergence, and you're pushing for more critical awareness around, okay, when we say it's a good thing, where is it coming from? What kind of system was in place? And articulating like the whole matrix beyond the final product, it's a very powerful thing. And as you were quoting before as well, there are different points of struggle. So you're located within your own space of change, trusting that other people within your bubble, within your classrooms and beyond will also, you know, be able to agitate the container enough for the disruption to be carried forward. So I feel those are things extremely valid to question and to ask, and how you framed it, I feel you're giving it a lot of tools. You know, looking at silence as also a tool of education. When do we resist and desist discourse? And also I feel it's framing it so people know that it's happening. And also front-loading conversations to say, please pay attention to the voices that are more dominant. Please pay attention about you and where you lay in the balance of overly dominant voices and extremely quieted voices. And I feel exercises like this can also activate this further. And also we are the starting point of part of the impact, but we don't know where it transcends us. And so we may feel that in those instances, oh my goodness, frustration, or it's not moving forward the way that I had anticipated or envisioned. But there are many, you know, ripple effects to impact beyond that. And even somebody who resists the work, now they have, you know, they have an awareness that there's something to resist. Before they came in presuming that everything is neutral or part of their everything was, but now there is this forced acknowledgement that no, I'm walking into legacies, and legacies that are being built and rebuilt every day. So I think it's important as well to look at change won't feel like change always, but it doesn't deny that, you know, decolonization is in attendance. So I really love what you shared. And also as me and the team were talking about how it's never ending. So we cannot expect to have a finished product and then it's this plug and play, right? And so having to recognize that change is happening even when the answer is another question.
Thank you so much, Ches and Kasim, for all these points. And I really want to mention that we shouldn't, as instructors or educators, romanticize marginal students in our classroom. as well as we need to find creative ways that the dominant voice interrupted. And we could have many different educational activities to use. And carousel is one of them. It's very effective to really bring each voice up front and pluralize the ways of knowing in our classrooms. And today we will also do and try this activity together. Before I let Chess to explain today's workshop, Dr. Kasim, do you have any last points to make or any last comments from you?
Well, I just maybe just empower people to continue to do this work. Thinking and challenging. I mean, I like to what I see as really important. Let's say as thinking about the sharing. Well, I guess I see that I don't bring any new ideas to the platform. So when I come to the classroom, but I'm really trying to share ideas from different struggles. Whether it's, past anti-colonial struggles or thinking about points of view from indigenous activists. And it's also like what I find really, I guess, the most accessible writing and the most to point is like people who were at the forefront of struggle. Like, I like the writings of Arthur Manuel because, he was someone who also knew what it was to make transformation. I mean, he was at the forefront, or, thinking, like Lee Miracle, or so I find like it's quite useful to when one is, let's say, in thinking like, how do I think about my syllabus, is also thinking about bringing those voices and bringing those struggles into the classroom. I think maybe like as Shez says, well, like, how do we think about that? These are ideas which are contested, right? And so there's going to be friction. And so, and you're bringing, if it was already mainstream, then there would be no fights. We'd already be agreeing upon all this. So it's to bring those voices which highlight the contention that exists, which already existed before the classroom began, but maybe just naming it.
Thank you so much, Kasim. And we're gonna let everyone go on a 5-minute break. It's been a really engaging discussion. And so take some time. It's actually a 3-minute break. And so everyone return back at 1:05, and then we're gonna get into our engaging activity. Looking forward to seeing everybody. Okay, we'll be back in one more minute. Okay, we are back on. Hope everyone had a nice break.
Amazing. So Jamila, you want me to take it away for the
Yes.
Decon? Perfect.
Yes.
Brilliant. So we are going to, as people settle back into the call, I'm just going to, briefly walk you through the quick set of instructions. And bear in mind, each team member is going to be in the breakout room sessions with you. We'll be floating in and out. So if you have follow-up questions, you will know where to find us. And as always, on your bar panel, on your screen, you'll have the hand raise option so that you can signal to us that you want quick assistance. And again, in the chat, we're going to be there. So I'm going to walk you through the basics. Then I'm going to walk you through the actual platform so you can visualize in context what it looks like. So the way that we're doing this, we took a syllabus and it's been anonymized and we broke it down into 3 sections, as we explained to you before. So we have the acknowledgements, the introduction, then we have the course objectives and the grading, and the last section is going to be the reading list materials. And what's going to happen, you're going to be assigned to one room to start. So if I'm in breakout room number 1, I'm starting with the square number 1, breakout room number 2, square number 2, and so on and so forth. And when you are in your actual box, you will see that section of the syllabus that you've been assigned, and you're going to have 2 or 3 prompts. All you have to do is take a minute as a team, read them over, and then brainstorm the way that you want to address them. You can ask your own questions, you can challenge what is being said, you can create your own answers, and the instructions are repeated for you so that you can see them properly. Then every 10 minutes, you'll be invited to move from your section to the next, so that within the time that we have been allotted, everybody would have been able to be hands-on on the totality of the syllabus. So that's how we are going to do this. As I said, I'm going to walk you through it so that you can visualize now that you have a sense of understanding around what it's going to actually look like in action. And people can let me know if you see my mural, you can just give me a thumbs up like this. So that's what I'm sharing with you. This is where we're going to be having the syllabus. So when you zoom in, you see section 1, 2, and 3. So depending on your breakout room, you're going to be starting in one of those. And then as you can see, the big square is your chunk of the syllabus. It's been anonymized for you. And here, the little post-its are your prompts. So you see prompt 1, 2, and 3. You take a minute, you reflect your answer, and all you have to do is double click, and then boom, you have a post-it, and that's where your team can, put their own answers. Then every 10 minutes, you're going to see a notification. You'll have one of us tell you. So you're going to have all the information to know that, okay, that's your cue, and we're moving to the next section. So really quickly, if you have a mouse like me, you just zoom in like this. And if you don't have a mouse like me or don't want to use it, you can see that in the corner on your right, at the bottom, you have a screen, and you just click on the section that you want to be in. And then you take the little circle and you zoom in and out. So it's very intuitive. But again, if that doesn't suffice, you know where to find me and when to find us. So that's the premise. If you have any question, we'll be with you. And then we have the beautiful team over at Fourth Space who's getting us started with the breakout room. So you will be in small groups. We want you to talk as much as possible. So we'll see maybe 3, 4 or so people. Okay, so Jamila, let me know if I missed anything, if you have any comments or questions that you wanted to make first.
No, that was perfect. We're going to be doing a large group discussion after, and we'll be in the breakout rooms with you all.
Perfect. So the last thing, thank you, Esgi, for reminding me. Of course, you want the link. So as you get set up, I'm just copying the link for you, and I'm putting it in the chat right now. This way, it doesn't matter what breakout room you're going to be in. Everyone is going to have access to the mural. So we're going to take a minute just for tech, and we'll be right with you. So in the meantime, you guys can, get inspired, think a little bit, and we won't be too long. Perfect. I know that Douglas is probably on the breakout room duty, so thank you for your patience and amazing work. And on average, we just want to have an equal distribution of participants, so there's no pressure there. And don't worry about us, we can move ourselves in and out. So yeah, that's the platform, and this is the carousel edition of it. So I see some people are getting acquainted with the platform, so it's not a bad idea to do that in the meantime, as we will get confirmation for the room that you're going to be assigned. And as you can see, we're all about experience to action. So it's a practice-based model of decolonization of the syllabus. And all you have to do is read, answer, challenge, decolonize, reinvent, enhance to transform together. And you'll see it's going to be very smooth, very organic, and we can't wait. And as we move forward, you will be able also to see the comments from the previous groups. So you can also feed your own reflections and help you, rethink your own processes and keep on decolonizing yourself as much as you decolonize the syllabus. So we won't be too long, people. So thank you for your patience. And then hopefully in a few seconds / minute, we should be all set up and everybody can engage the space.
Yes. And so Gladys and Mos just have to accept the breakout room you've been assigned to, and then you'll be off to room number 2. And then Ches and I will jump into a room.
Amazing. And if ever for the remaining 2, you have any questions, you can just direct message us in the chat and we'll be with you. But like Jamila was saying, you're going to see this big pop-up on your screen. It's pretty hard to miss. And it's an invitation for you to self-select into the mini group. And as soon as you do that, then we're ready to rock and roll. And we'll make sure that each team member will be there to assist you.
Perfect. Just one more person now.
Amazing.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we can go now.
Amazing. See you soon.
Bye. Awesome. We almost have everyone from the breakout rooms here. Once we do, we're going to wrap up with some insights.
Yeah, so thank you, Jamila. As you were saying, this is the closure. So time flew. It was very nourishing, beautiful conversations. So I'm just going to take you to the wrap-up section, and it ties in beautifully with the main points that were covered in some of our breakout room discussions. And we invite you to share those. So keep those as prompts to keep on activating your reflection, and feel free to engage us on our platform on Facebook and Instagram to share what your answers are, as we won't necessarily hold space today for that. We want to nurture you and to keep on rethinking how you decolonize yourself in your world. So a big part of it was looking at land acknowledgements and to how we want to adapt them into our work and syllabus. And beautiful comments that were shared on Mural were how not to be performative around land acknowledgements. So what kind of workshops or trainings we can do, and how can we create a practice of re-engagement with the land acknowledgements over and over again through different lenses and perspectives. So we had people talking even about geographies, right? So if you're teaching about geography and land, thinking about the street names that we have and thinking about how the geographies that we occupy have been chosen by different powers, right? So it's not innocent and it's not incidental, and how we can use this as prompts to different class conversations over time to then scale a better understanding of decolonizing land, as part of decolonizing education, like Ezgi was saying. And then number 2 is how do we pluralize voices beyond the canon and in our field through the syllabus in our work as well. So this is a very powerful point that was being made. And again, beautiful conversations on Mural about that. So we even talk about adapting, involving different languages in the canon and define the notion that North American English language scholarship is the method of, is the way to go in a higher education, and having different formats like Dr. Kasim was sharing in his beautiful presentation. So intergenerational dialogue as part of a response paper for projects, playing around with grading systems. And we talk about reaching out to allies and other institutions who already successfully implemented those different modes of operations for grading system and course objectives. And the last one is how will you set out to deconstruct the syllabus as more than a diverse reading list? So Jamila commenced with that, and we're closing the space with that notion. So you have a lot of tools right now to lean into the work. And like Dr. Kasim was saying, we all have different points of power within different points of struggle. So whatever, sounds like more applicable for your positionality, do that. And then keep the conversation going with the hub and with your own people. So connect with us on Facebook, and you can, share your comments, and also on Instagram if you prefer. So those were the main arches. Yes, Jamila, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just getting excited to say next steps, but I'm too excited, so.
Amazing. And actually, thank you, Jamila, for this one. We decided to do things different. So our next steps, the micro actions are questions, because as you said, decolonization is an unfinished work and conversation. So that's our quote from Ezgi. We're always quoting her. And those are the 3 questions for you / action steps. And in terms of next steps, actually with the hub, what next? Where do we go from there? How do we stay connected? So we're going to have a feedback form that we will send out to you, and we want to hear your feedback so that we can evolve this space. And we have another event coming up on November 8th. Stay tuned for that on our social for all the details. We also have this new program that we call Tea Time, and we focus on artivism, so leveraging art as a form of resistance for decolonialists. And you can be a student, whatever your profile is, you're more than welcome to be there. It's mostly a student-led space because we want to center the voices of those that are not always seen as much as they can. And then we have a website that's going to be launched very soon, so you can stay tuned for that for more details on our platform. And team, let me know if I'm missing on anything, if I forgot something, but we're going to move into Jamila so you can wrap up more formally.
Oh, no, thank you so much, Shazan. And thank you so much, everybody that's been with us today, both here and then on our live. It's always a pleasure. And thank you so much to our speaker, Dr. Kasim. I'm very excited. Anyone who didn't get to ask questions, we have the question. We'll talk to Dr. Kasim about it, and we'll put it into our feedback message so you can hear the answer. So thank you so much. We'll see you November 8th back at the 4th space for our 5th syllabus deconstruction. We'll hope to take this a step further.
All right, folks. I hope you can hear me in Zoom. Yes, amazing.
Yeah.
I think just as a closing word, I wanted to say how much we appreciate not only the intense amount of labor it takes to put this together and how incredibly thought out and generous and careful you are with this planning of these sessions, but also how important it is, I think, that we're doing this in this kind of space, virtual or otherwise, that is thought of as the front door of of Concordia University. You know, that we're having these conversations very loudly here on the street, and in Zoom, in that kind of webiverse. I think is a really important thing to continue doing, and we appreciate your persistence of spirit, I guess, in putting these events together, and we look forward to continuing to support you. So yeah, thanks so much, you all. And again, I'll just mention that this has been live streamed on our YouTube channel and it's accessible there now. So just look up Concordia University for Space and you'll find it right away if you want to share it with your friends and colleagues on social media, etc. Okay, on that note, I think Doug and I are going to close up the Zoom now. Thanks, Ezgi, for being here with me, having a little partner in the space. It's been great.
Well, thank you so much. It was wonderful to be here.
Awesome. And yeah, see you again next time. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.